Welcome to Mind Over Marketing, the show where we break down the marketing, sales, and mindsets that separate the winners from the wannabes. The host, Todd Starr, has been on the front lines of business, sales, and marketing for himself and for his clients for the last 10 years. Todd says, "I believe that success in business isn't about doing more, it's about seeing differently." So today, we're getting inside the mind of somebody who truly thinks differently. They've built a successful business, but more importantly, they've had to outthink, outsell, and outmarket their competition to get to where they are. And we can all learn from their wins, but more importantly, from their failures to make our businesses better.
Today's episode is a special one, as I'm joined by Chris Turkington. Chris has spent over 20 years in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. He's worn many hats through that career, but the one that interests me the most is his time as a SERE instructor, teaching people how to survive, evade, resist, and escape. He's taught leadership at the New Zealand Defence Forces Command and Leadership School, where the phrase, "let's circle back to that," is replaced with "do it properly or we might die." Today, he brings all of that experience into the business world as a lead coach at Aegis Leadership, his company. I've been privileged enough to have clients with military backgrounds quite a few times, and it's always very clear to me how their relationship with adversity is wired differently to everyone on Civvy Street. In the military, leadership isn't a job title. It's a behavior, a standard, a responsibility, and Chris is steeped in a world where leadership isn't a slogan. It can be the difference between life and death. Fun fact, he also once barbecued a snake in Arizona using nothing but the sun and a foil blanket, which I'd like to dive into. Chris is the kind of guy who could lose his backpack, his map, and his lunch and somehow come back to base with a promotion, 3 new leadership insights, and a roasted reptile for lunch. I'm really excited to dive into the show today with Chris, talking all things leadership, resilience, and whatever else happens when you mix military training, survival skills, and a rock-solid mindset. So, Chris, thanks so much for finding the time to come on.
Well, thanks for having me, Todd. I'm looking forward to it.
Take me right back to the beginning. Where were you born? What was your childhood like? What were your what was your early life like?
All good. So I'm the son of immigrants from Northern Ireland. So both my parents are from Northern Ireland, and they came over circa 40 years ago, I guess. You know, the political situation in Northern Ireland, as you'll know, not the best. So originally they wanted to get into Canada, but that didn't work out for whatever reason. So New Zealand was choice number two, and I'm very happy that they came here. Could have been an ice hockey player, you'll never know. But so first New Zealander from my entire family, so that is something I'm very proud of, and also proud of the Irish background. I guess really good childhood. I was very lucky. My parents did an amazing job, so I'll never be able to thank them enough for that. Was exposed to a lot of sports and things early on. So my father was a very good sportsman, or is a very good sportsman. He's getting a bit old now, but he's good. So mum and dad exposed me to a lot of that early on. So, you know, swimming, which is really important in New Zealand, being surrounded by water. Football and cricket were the big ones, but essentially they gave me a rip at anything. So racket sports, you name it. And I think that's really where my love for sports came about for sure. And then the leadership piece and team culture, I think was born of that, you know, understanding working in a team dynamic and towards a common cause and stuff. Went to school in Wellington, Kapiti College. So I'm from the Kapiti coast, north of Wellington there, a little town called Raumati Beach. So it's a nice spot. But we currently live in Marlborough, which is also a very nice spot. And I can't say I was exceptionally good at school. You know, some things interested me, and that's kind of been a bit of a rule of my life, is things that I've seen value in and that I've been excited about, I've generally done very well. But then things that I have found boring or not interesting, whatever it might be, then I've kind of half-assed it, if I'm brutally honest. So that's sort of how I am today. So I did okay at school. I did enough. Could have done better, of course. And then I guess, you know, out of school, had a few jobs like laboring and those types of things, just really trying to earn some money for beer, you know, as you do when you're a young dude. And then I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. Like university didn't really appeal that much at the time. And we had a family friend who was in the Air Force, and she sort of said, "Hey, had you considered the military?" And at that stage, I hadn't. But then, yeah, went on a couple of sort of open days and, recruiting drives, and spent a little bit of time at a couple of the bases just understanding what it's all about. And yeah, they obviously said, "Look, you obviously like sports and you like the team piece and that, and have you considered being a physical training instructor?" And I didn't even know what that was. So yeah, did a little bit of looking into it, and yeah, sort of thought it looks like a great opportunity, and went and did the selection. It's quite a competitive career path to get into. So I went to Hobsonville at the time, and did a week long selection there with a whole bunch of other candidates, and then yeah, somehow got through that, and went on training, and the rest is history. And yeah, like 20 plus years later, it's gone in the blink of an eye, and I've been very fortunate to do some crazy stuff. And I guess I'm a bit of a mongrel of all of that experience. So jack of all trades, master of none is probably how I'd describe myself. Yeah,
I'd have to disagree with that, but we'll stick with that for a minute.
thanks, so. Yeah.
You're a master of many.
Thank you.
You say you couldn't complain about your childhood, or complain about your parents. I think what do you think makes good parents?
Cool. Um, what makes good parents? Well, I think like first and foremost, they've got to care for you, right? So, we can say that goes without saying, but a lot of people don't have that experience, which is super sad. They've got to care about you and your welfare, and want to see you do well. I think that's really important. I think as well, they've got to hold the line. And what I mean by that is, there's standards, there's expectations, there's social norms that your child needs to do and abide by. And I think our role as parents is to set up good citizens, right? Is to send people into the world that are going to do the right thing, and hold themselves to a good standard, and help make the world a better place. And I think a lot of the time I've seen people do the pat on the back, the friend approach that comes easily to most people. So they do really well in that space. But then when it comes to holding the line and discipline and setting standards and holding people to account, I see a lot of people struggle in that department because they don't want to be perceived as the bad person, right?
Mm.
Whereas, as humans, we need structure, we need discipline, we need to be held to account. We crave that. So I think, yeah, a good parent absolutely loves and cares for their child, and essentially will do anything for them within limits. But I think a good parent also holds their child to account, and makes sure that their behaviour is in line with being a good person and a good citizen. I think so. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
That's a good answer. I think that's where you first learn leadership, right? As a child, everybody is um, in a boardroom of some description, right, around the kitchen table, and that's where your belief system is essentially initially programmed, right, with what is okay and what is not okay. And I think you're right. I think it's short term comfort for long term discomfort if you don't expose your kids to resistance, to things that challenge them. Um, so yeah, I think, as I said in the beginning, I've had a few clients and friends that have military backgrounds, and yeah, it's always interesting talking to them about this stuff. And you're able to frame it in like a healthy way, that's not like be a hard ass on your kids, but just don't be too soft, I suppose. And the world isn't easy, so the quicker you can
Yeah,
kind of get them to speed with that, the better.
I think so. And like, that's another thing is people think that holding people to account or setting standards, or they think that means being a hard ass and being the bad guy and going in all guns blazing. But that's not what it means at all.
Mm.
It just means sitting down and having a good conversation, and talking around things like, hey, what did we agree upon? What do we know to be the right thing? And what have we done so far? And what can we do to do a little bit better next time? Like
Mm.
it's not a I'm going to sit you down and give you a bollocking. Like that's just not effective. Like
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I think holding the line is not being a hard ass, right? Like it's very different to that.
Yeah. It's also sort of being accountable to the standards you're setting yourself, right? But leading by example.
100%.
Like, there's lots of people that don't do that, or you can't have ice cream while they're drinking a beer every night. It's kind of like, well, you are an addict of some description, and you're telling me not to be one while showing me how to be one. That's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And like the best leaders, we model ourselves on people, right? So
Mm.
we role model the good and learn from the bad, essentially, in my experience. And
Yeah.
people are always teaching you something. It's just whether they realize it or not.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
yeah, but I guess leadership's example, and the best leaders that I've ever seen, that's all they've ever tried to do is lead themselves well first,
Yep.
and then the rest kind of follow suit after that. Because you're right, like we're all going to miss. We're all people. We all miss all the time.
Yep.
Leadership's hard. Life's hard. But I think if people see that you're striving to be just a little bit better each day and that you are doing what you say, and all of that lines up, I think the rest sort of marries up in the end. We'll always be the hardest person to lead.
Mm. Yeah, and assuming you're in an environment that actually fosters growth. I think I mean, I had a similar upbringing to you, really. My parents gave us lots of good experiences and cared a lot for us, and also made us work hard, and or showed us what hard work was, right? My dad bought a bit of dirt in Cornwall and put a caravan on it and built our house around us over 18 years, whilst raising a family. And so we just saw it firsthand, right? He would come home from his day job, we'd have dinner, and he'd be outside building a garage. So it's like we saw it rather than him teaching it to us. But I think misery loves company. And I've had, girlfriends in the past, and I get around their family, and I just think, no wonder you are the way you are. Like no wonder we conflict on these beliefs, because like this is what you believe based on, and it's kind of like people don't want you to grow, because it's a bit of a mirror back to them that they're not growing, or that they can't remain, that your boundaries are changing. And yeah,
Yes.
it's tricky, and you don't get to choose your environment. But so I think, I mean, I believe that your reality is ultimately downstream from your behavior, and I believe that your behavior is downstream of your beliefs. And in order to change sort of how you experience the world, to me, that starts at your belief system. You've seen a lot of pressure in the field and now in the boardroom. Like, where do you think humans break first when things are stressful? Is it their mindset? Is it their beliefs, their habits, their identity? Like, what do you think is the first chink in the armor to go?
Ooh. I think maybe mindset. Like, we know that the body can continue long after the mind's telling you that you've had enough.
Mm.
You look at special forces operators, or people of a high standard anywhere, they're not immune to their mind being like, hey, man, you should give up now. Like, you deserve it. You've done enough. This is hard. No one's telling you to be here. So I think, in my experience, the mind will give up long before the body actually will. And maybe in leadership scenarios or wherever it might be, I think it's people's minds probably that will give first, where they'll get into that negative thought loop around, this is hard, we don't have to be here, we don't need to be doing this. Um, so yeah, I think the psychological piece will probably give first for most.
Yeah.
It's probably an outlier, somebody that can think all of those thoughts and feel all of those feelings and persevere in spite of that. I think that's a real rarity. So,
Mm.
yeah, hard one to really put your finger on, but I think generally it's probably the mindset that will give way with people first. And the good thing is, it can be trained, just like the body can be trained, just like your muscles can be trained. You can train your mind, but it's hard and it takes a lot of diligent and concentrated effort.
Mm.
And like, you look at the All Blacks back in the day, right? So they were the best team in the world by a country mile. And then they went through that World Cup campaign where they got knocked out. Was it in the quarters by France?
Yeah.
Or something like that? And they realized, there's that real famous footage of Dan Carter sitting in the stands just with his head in his hands, like, how
Mm.
has this happened? And they got real serious around understanding, hey, we're optimized for strategy, we're optimized for physicality better than anybody else, but we've neglected the psychological element. And they went away, and that's where the redhead bluehead concept came about. And they put a lot of concentrated effort into the psychological domain. And after that, they were unstoppable, right? And that's a great example of, you can have everything else optimized, but if you haven't got your mindset correct, that's a really, really big fracture in your setup.
Yeah, that's very true, and kind of a good perspective on it. I look at beliefs. I look at your individual beliefs as a scale, and basically your experiences are then creating your beliefs, right? So if you believe in business, lots of people believe it's hard to make money, and
Yeah.
but you actually act out your belief system, right? If you believe it's hard to make money, you will self-sabotage, you will do too much work, you won't charge enough. These are all kind of tiny little beliefs that form to make a belief system, right? I don't think people
Yes.
actually understand what a belief system even is, and how it works, and how to change it, and how long it takes to change it. But if you think of a scale like that, then the more you do things that prove your belief, then it tips more to like, I really believe this. The problem is on the other side, you've got the opposite of that. So if I say, do you think it's easy to make money? And you say no, then you believe it's hard to make money. Then if I say, do you think it's hard to make money? You say yes. You have the opposite, right? So, and it's easier to change that negative side than it is to just have endless motivation and be David Goggins. It's like you've actually got to like undo some of the work, and ultimately all of your tiny little beliefs come together to form your paradigm, your how you actually observe the world. So if all of your beliefs are defective in some way, and out of alignment with the goal that you actually want, you're just acting out your belief systems, you know. And then you think conflict in the boardroom is a personal attack, or you know, this is where it all goes wrong, right? So it's like ultimately, like, everything changes in physical reality if your belief systems are in alignment with how you want it to look. So it's interesting that you brought up the All Blacks thing, because yeah, it's a good, and I think this is important for guys like you to do the type of work you're doing, just because you've got so much deep training and knowledge on how this stuff works, that like just a leadership coach that does a weekend course and gets a certificate. Like, I just think um, there's obviously been a big wave over the last decade, really, with your SAS Who Dares Wins guys and your Ant Middletons, and but it's like you guys are just steeped in like 400 years of military strategy and history and mindset and difficult environments, and it's kind of like, yeah, it makes so much sense that you guys get the success that you get and see the transformations, because this is second nature to 2 decades of learning it versus, you know, see a fishing business. It's kind of like you do a few weekend leadership courses, but you guys have a different level.
Yeah, I thank you. Firstly, I definitely wouldn't put myself in the same category as some of those names. So they're pretty impressive. But yeah, like we had the motto at the survival school where I worked was knowledge born through experience.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. Is we can all sit in a comfortable classroom with a coffee in our hand and talk about all these models and get really excited about it, but it's the application that's the kicker, right? And when you do something over and over and over again, and you get burned and you fail and you test and adjust and you learn from that over and over and over again, it's like a callus on a wound. It grows, it gets stronger. And then, like you say, when you can speak from that level of experience, it's much different to somebody who, like you say, has done a qualification or a degree or whatever it might be. And that's cool. It's not to discredit that at all. That still takes effort and, fortitude and all the rest of it. But yeah, when you actually put the reps in out on the paddock, it's a different kettle of fish. And back to that point you were talking about as well, around belief system and always sort of coming to that level. One way that I heard it described that has sort of burned into my head is your belief system's like a thermostat. So, we've got beliefs across a whole range of things: finances, family, work, business, whatever it might be. But you'll never stray too far from this thermostat. So, basically, finances, if you've got a mindset around, well, money comes easily to me and I'm, prosperous and all those types of things. If you ever get too low, so if things aren't going that well for you, you'll always find a way to bounce it back to homeostasis, because that's your belief system. Same deal. The opposite is if you've got like a real scarcity and poverty mindset. If you get too much money relative to your thermostat homeostasis,
Not spending.
you'll self-sabotage to bring yourself back to that baseline. So yeah, I agree, and that was one way that I liked like having it articulated.
Yeah, it's a really, really good way to explain it. And I think but again, it comes back to your experience, right? Ultimately, like, what is an experience, right? It's sensory input at a fundamental level. It is your five senses, and you can't have a belief, like, you can't have a judgment-based belief on something that you haven't experienced, that you don't know exists, right?
You can, it just wouldn't be very good.
There's there's a plant pot next to me, right? I'm going to show it to you in a minute. But give me your judgment based belief on that plant.
Are you? Oh, okay. So I haven't seen it yet.
You can't. How can you judge
No,
what
yeah.
color it is, how big it is, how small it is? I'll show you.
Null and void. I'm stabbing in the dark.
Little
Oh,
orange cactus, right?
how good's that?
So that's now you've experienced this now, right? So now
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
judge it. You can say it's too arty, it's not looking very healthy, it's not what you thought it would be. Now you can form a belief around it, but if you haven't experienced it, you can't actually have a belief on it. I remember finding out there's a country or a part of France or something called is it Andorra? I think it's called Andorra. I'd never heard of it,
Yeah.
basically.
Don't quote me. My geography is okay.
Yeah, yeah. But you can't until I'd heard of that. It had never come into I'd never heard it mentioned on a movie. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know the population or the culture or anything. I had no concept that that was even a real place. Now, in objective reality, it is. People live there. It's an actual place. But you can only form a judgment, like a belief, on something you know exists first. So go and ask someone in a Peruvian tribe if money is hard to make. They won't even have the concept of even a fiscal structure or anything. So it's all you, basically. Everything that is in your reality is as a result of your beliefs, because that informs the actions that you take. And I think that's why it's so important to everything is downstream from your beliefs. If your beliefs are out of alignment with what your goal is, then you'll give up, you'll self-sabotage, you won't even believe it's possible, you won't even try. And objectively, if someone's done something you want to do, then it is actually possible to do. It's just not possible for you because you don't believe it. So yeah. Anyway, that was one of the tangents I was explaining at the beginning.
I think it was well put, man. It was good.
Um, so in your work now, then, how do you what do you see in leadership in New Zealand? Like, what are the dominant problems that we're getting wrong?
I'll talk about just in a general sense, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it kind of harks back to what I was saying before around, and a good question around what makes a good parent. I think similar to what makes a good leader or what makes a good person. I think a lot of it's very, very closely aligned. But yeah, one thing that I've seen for sure is people, leaders, they're really interested in being liked by their staff or the people that report to them or whatever it might be. Like that seems to be the highest importance, is almost being like friends with them. And I'm not saying you can't be friends with people, but I'm saying there's this thing called professional separation. So, as the boss, the commander, whoever it might be, we all have obligations, right? We have obligations to stakeholders, to whatever, to command chains, whatever it might be, to deliver on behalf of the organization. So we've got to take care of our people, but also we've got to deliver. If we're not delivering, we're probably not going to be around for very long. And that's in a lot of contexts. And what I've seen is people have put friendship at the forefront of their priorities. So they want to be liked by their people, they want to be friends. But what that means a lot of the time is they come to a decision point where it's like, okay, I've got to hold this person to account, but I don't want to jeopardize this friendship that I've built with them. So as soon as we get to that point where thinking about relationships and considering that over our obligations as a boss or whatever it might be, that's where I think maybe we've missed the mark. So I think overall people are really good in that the welfare space and looking after their people and encouraging them and giving them praise. That's all really, really important. But there's a spectrum, and at one end there's the welfare piece, like I just spoke about, and at the other end, there's the discipline piece. And people are normally default to either end. So they're either really good in the welfare and struggle in the discipline, or they are just authoritarian as and don't consider the welfare at all. So the best leaders I've ever seen bounce up and down that spectrum. So what that looks like is they'll be giving someone some welfare encouragement or intervention. They might have had a family member that's passed away. So in one breath, they're helping with that. And then they step into the very next room and they're having a performance discipline conversation with somebody else. And they can move up and down that spectrum as the demand is needed, basically. So to answer your question in a nutshell, I think people are particularly good at that welfare end. Um, Whereas come down the discipline end and holding the line and standards and accountability, I see people not so strong in that space as a rule of thumb. And I think it's because they're more concerned with being liked than being the boss.
So if we assume that's happened then in an organization, what's the process to actually undo some of that? Like, because obviously, is it a phased approach, or is it just like cold turkey? You're going to be a bit more tough, or what? What's the kind of process to changing and undoing that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think it depends what level you sort of notice it at. So, like, let's say for me, if I was in charge of a team and I had noticed that some of the bosses were not holding the line, or there were really big lapses that were just getting left undealt with. For me, it always starts with a conversation, right? That's the first part. So I bring the person in and say, hey, look, these are the things I've noticed so far from my perspective. Give me yours, and I just let them talk, because most of the time we should be listening, right? And not just imparting our judgment on things. You've got two ears and one mouth. We should use them in that ratio. So I'll just want to understand where they're coming from. Look, these are the things I've noticed. This is sort of my interpretation on it. Where are you coming from? How does that sit with you? And they'll just talk and say, oh, for this, I was considering this. And actually, my intent behind this was this. So when they just talk and you listen, you might actually learn a few things and be like, well, actually, the way that you've described that to me now makes perfect sense. I was putting my lens on it with my bias and my context. But now that I've listened to you and I'm understanding your thought process, it actually makes perfect sense what you're doing. Well done, carry on. Or they might explain it from their perspective. You're like, well, here's a couple of things maybe you need to consider. And that's where you can start to educate, right? But I think if you pull someone in your office and you're just like, that's crap, do it this way, sure, you're going to buy some compliance for a very short period of time, but we know underneath that compliance there's going to be resentment, there's going to be mistrust, and they're going to do whatever they can subconsciously to undermine, either consciously or subconsciously, to undermine you at every step of the way. And leadership's influence, and the most powerful influence, is personally earned authority, or mana.
Yep.
Where treating people the right way, being competent, being genuinely interested in them. If we're trying to use the big stick all the time, that'll buy you compliance for a very short period of time, but there's no longevity to that. That personally earned authority is the one we want to shoot for. And sometimes there is a time to use the big stick. It might be really safety critical, or really time critical, or heavy reputational damage potentially at stake. And that's where it might be like, hey guys, we're doing it this way and these are the reasons why. But I believe where we can consult, we should, because if people feel heard and they can give their ideas and their buy-in and their perspectives, that's going to buy us a lot of goodwill, but it's also going to buy us a lot of their willingness and their buy-in to whatever we are going to do. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that one.
So ultimately, being a better listener, to get more into alignment with what everyone's objectives are.
Yeah, I think it's like seek first to understand and then be understood, right? So yeah, you should absolutely, where you can, sit down and just see where the person's coming from, because maybe when they lay out their reasons for it, it does actually make sense, because what we see is only one piece of the pie. There's so much going on behind that we don't understand. So you need to understand, just like you said with beliefs and stuff. If how can you even start to understand something that you've never seen? It's very, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if at the beginning we were having an argument about that plant, that would be pretty unfair for you to be in that situation because you don't
Yeah.
even know anything about it, right? And if you think
Percent.
about that in terms of a leader that's unaware at a certain level in the organization of something culturally or behaviorally or some other influence that they don't even know about, it's kind of like you couldn't argue with me that that is a big green plant because and if I'm seeing it like I am, I'm just losing instant respect for you and correct
Exactly.
because you don't get it. So
That's
it's
right. Whereas if I was just like, hey Todd, like explain the plant to me, tell me a bit
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
And then there you go, you've nailed it. Yeah.
yeah. Then you can say we're not allowed orange plants in the building, and then there's some knowledge, right?
Yeah, well, hey, just understand that if we do have an orange plant in the building, these are some of the flow-on effects that maybe you're not seeing or maybe you don't realize. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
interesting. So tell me then about Aegis Leadership. So when did you start it, and what's the kind of actual underlying core mission?
Yep. So Aegis is new. We've obviously the skill sets are not new; those have been around a long time, as you touched on.
Yeah,
The company itself's maybe 2 months old, so we're pretty new in the game, and yeah, trying to get our name out there a little bit, and we just know like once we get in front of people, the difference is going to be apparent very, very quickly.
mm,
So it's just a matter of getting in front of people. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
cool.
And the mission is obviously to get alongside people and help them work more efficiently as a team, but also something that we're really big on is being able to perform under pressure. So you've spoken about those types of things and the importance of being able to continue to perform even when things aren't going well. Because
Mm,
let's be fair, like how often is the ship sailing smoothly? Like not very often. So we need to be able to still sail in rough seas. So yeah, I think the mission fundamentally is to help people, and if we can get alongside businesses and seek to understand where they're coming from, maybe we'll see some plants in their office that they're not seeing, and we can maybe help shed some light on that, and maybe unblock some things that are stopping them leveling up their business. So yeah, I guess at the heart of it, it's to help people and take what we've learned and the skills that we have and maybe pass those on to somebody else.
Any particular sectors or industries that you are like drawn to, or kind of anyone that needs help?
No, not really. I think particularly as a starting point, we'll work with anybody
Yeah.
that sees value in what we have to offer, of course, and then maybe over time as we sort of feel our way through and maybe our skills and thought processes and mindsets lend themselves better to certain demographics. But I don't think that's something that we'll learn until we get after a little bit more. I think you cast the net wide initially and then you sort of start to niche down after that. So yeah, we'll help anyone as a starting point, but I also think there's many ways to skin a cat, and there's many ways to see the world, and I'm very mindful that our approach isn't going to gel with everyone, and that's totally fine. We're much better trying to help people that sort of see the world in a similar way and get value from the types of things we're talking about. So this this isn't going to be a philosophy that I would go and impress on somebody that's more emotionally driven and more empathetically based. Empathy is important, and I'm not saying that we don't need to have it, but I think there's more to life than just being driven by your emotional state because it's fleeting and it's riddled with bias and a lot of the times we need to act in spite of how we're feeling. So
Yep.
yeah, like this isn't going to be for everyone, and that's totally fine.
Yep. Cool. Good answer. Yeah, I disagree with you entirely on the niche thing, on the
Okay,
casting. Yeah, well, I'll talk about that with you after.
cool,
Um,
awesome, amazing.
I normally charge for what I'll tell you, so I'm not going to put it out here for free. But
Thanks, Todd.
there's a very clear reason why you should rethink that.
Appreciate it.
In terms of kind of then the approach that you're going to take to the market, why do you believe that like a military-driven approach um, is valuable?
Okay, I think like in the military, generally, you don't do things unless they work because, like you've said, the end state or the potential cost is extremely high, right? And a lot of times it is life and death. Like, it's a pretty risky and serious game. So units, and particularly like elite units and other high performers, they're only going to take on things that work. So I think what we bring is tried and trusted mindsets and skills and tools that have been used in the wildest of wests for decades and have proven effective. So
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
theory, is it? It's not a theory.
no. And like I said before, there's nothing wrong with theory, but theory without application is just entertainment, right? So
Yeah.
we take tools that are tried and trusted and used real world by the best, and we can shape those to anyone's particular context, and they can get the same benefit. You don't have to be on the battlefield. You can take those skills and principles and apply them to your particular game to help you be better. So I think that's the beauty of the military piece, is they're not just concepts, it's not just theory, it's tried and tested stuff that we know works and works very well.
Yeah.
And then if we can give that to other people to help them do better, then why wouldn't you?
So we're last quarter of 2025, depending on when people listen to this. But what's the current kind of service offering? What's the process? Is it workshops? Is it kind of one-on-one coaching? Is it online programs? Like how does someone engage with you at this stage?
Yeah, so our current obviously, we have a website, so they can go check us out at www.aegisleadership.co.nz. We're building up our LinkedIn presence, so they can find us on LinkedIn. We've also got a Facebook page, so all the standard type stuff. But as far as our core offerings, obviously we've only been around a couple of months, but there's two initial core offerings, and those are a 60 to a 90-minute workshop that can be to individuals or groups. It doesn't really matter. We operate well in both. One of those is high performing teams, and the other one is decision making under pressure. So those are the two like entry level type offerings. It's not entry level in content, but that's kind of the starting point. And then we also do a 6-week one-on-one coaching intervention. That's where we'll take our leadership framework and we'll basically run a diagnostic to see where somebody sits as far as strengths and weaknesses, and then we can help them really get dialed down on their weaknesses. And then we also do a retainer. So if businesses want to work with us on a more long-term basis, we have a retainer arrangement as well, where we can consult to them basically as required. So
Awesome.
those are the four initial offerings for Aegis.
Nice. And you've said we a few times. Tell me about Richard.
Yep. So Richard Raven is my business partner. Again, we know each other very well, serving together in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. He is and was a pilot, flew Hercules aeroplanes. So he brings that military flavour in a slightly different context with the aviation world and the aviation background. But he's since branched out into the corporate sector, and he's doing very, very well there. So again, he brings a lot of different elements around knowledge and experience and lived experience as well. So, Richard is my business partner, and the two of us make up Aegis Leadership. That humility piece is particularly for military people generally, people that come from good units. That humility piece is massive, and the not tooting your own horn basically is a big one, but that can be to your detriment, right? Because you don't advocate for yourself or truly reflect your skills and knowledge and experience. So we will be up the premium price point end of the offering, purely because we know what we bring. So, that's not an arrogance thing. It's just the facts. So we will charge at the top end of what you would expect. And maybe now reflecting on your earlier question around who's our target demographic, that by default is probably going to narrow it down. So, yeah.
Okay. So last question then, if you could leave listeners, anyone that's actually got this far, if you could leave them with like a few final insights or a principle or a mental model or something, what would sort of a timeless lesson be that you would want every leader or business owner to walk away from this show thinking?
Yeah. One that sort of immediately comes to mind, it's a little bit cliche, but it's the leaders are readers. And that got taught to me very early in my military career by a boss that I had that I really respected and was a very, very good commander and leader. But that's what he said to me. He's like, Turks, leaders are readers. And what that means is always continue to learn, always continue to evolve, develop yourself, put yourself in challenging situations, jumping on podcasts with people you've never met before, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because that's where character is forged, right? It's, as you touched on earlier, Todd, it's forged in difficulty. It's the struggle, getting to the top of the mountain is not the thing, it's the climb. So you should always put yourself in challenging situations, because that's where we develop and get better as people. So leaders are readers, always be a learner and always look to develop yourself, I think is probably a good place to start.
What's your favorite book?
Ooh. I'm really enjoying Influence. I'm reading Influence at the moment by who's the author? It's like a really famous book. He's a PhD psychologist. Influence.
Oh, Cialdini.
Cialdini.
Yeah, he's a super genius.
I'm reading that at the moment. That's an amazing book. I would also recommend How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's a fantastic book as well.
Absolutely. Good one. Cool. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd. It's been cool.
Yeah.
Mind over marketing, the podcast.